The trail leading up the pumpkin house was very peaceful. I could hear crickets, frogs, and the calls of various other animals that made their home on an island full of pumpkins. Orange and black moths flew around in the night, attracted to the flames, but never quite getting close enough to burn themselves on the candles. As we got closer, I saw small things run through the pumpkins. I paused for a moment, thinking it was a threat, but then Summer grabbed my hand and she pointed in the shadow between two different pumpkins. From underneath those pumpkins, something peeked out from beneath the vines and glanced up towards me. The dark eyes shone in its dark fur. Two long ears stood up nearly straight, carefully listening to any possible threats. It took a few steps closer to us. The nose sniffed in the night, standing on four legs. The rabbit examined us before it got closer to us, just a meter away before the bunny stopped, then flopped onto its side, revealing the white belly in the dark fur. The rabbit was relaxed around us, showing us its belly and showing us it was comfortable. We crouched down to look at the bunny, careful not to pet it because we weren't sure if it was okay to pet. After a moment, I heard more rustling in the vines as I saw other rabbits approach us. These were very small babies that approached us before flopping next to the mother bunny, all just lying there in front of us. Out of everything that we faced so far in the pumpkin house, why did we encounter a fluffle of rabbits in a pumpkin patch? There was no scare here, no test, no sudden change, just fluffy bunnies bouncing in the wood. We stood there watching the rabbits for a moment before they got up and walked back into the pumpkin patch. That is a little strange after everything, isn't it? I asked everyone who nodded except for Marceline. Something is different, she said as she pointed to where the trail ended. At the end of the trail were several electric lanterns. They were built to resemble old gas lanterns, but thankfully there was a switch and there were fully charged batteries. As we made our way to the house itself, the porch was decorated in a very classic Hallows Eve way. Masks sat on the wall, carved out of wood and decorated to scare spirits. We saw masks not too dissimilar to our own. We saw masks carved with laughing goblins, screaming ghouls, and in one very interesting example, a raven. The masks hung from the walls on the outside, and on the porch banister were more carved pumpkins. Pumpkins that had one face pointing out into the yard and the other facing back to the porch. The side facing the porch were screaming faces with triangular eyes and teeth, a bit of red paint to make it look like they were bleeding. The sides that faced the house were much friendlier. The triangular eyes were facing down, and the mouths were smiling with rectangular teeth with no red paint at all. A few of the pumpkins even wore straw hats, making them look more personable and approachable. The shutters and curtains were both closed, making it impossible to look into the pumpkin house. The door itself was decorated with cobwebs on the top and a bowl of candy in front of the door. There were two notes, one note on the door and the other on the bowl of candy. The candy asked us to only take two pieces of candy. The door told us to knock before entering. If this was a test, I wasn't going to fail it. I reached down and grabbed two different aluminum wrapped sweets. Opening the foil revealed I got myself a brownie. I took a bite from the brownie as I knocked on the door. Just a moment after I knocked, the door gently creaked open. Just inside of the doorway, I could see the parlor. There was a large fireplace with a roaring fire, 7 chairs set out, and I could see paintings on the walls. As I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me. Before I had time to process it, Summer knocked and the door opened again. Apparently, the house would only let us in one at a time. While I waited for the others to come into the house, I looked over the many paintings on the walls. There were many strange paintings. I saw a painting of an old man in all black with a white beard, but when the flames danced just right, the old man was a grinning skeleton in all white with a black shadow behind him. His eye sockets had candles in them, shining bright in the darkness. In another painting, I saw a man on his knees trying to propose to a woman in a light blue dress. When the lights flickered, I saw a tall, headless figure in a black and red doublet, with a hatchet decapitating the kneeling man, still brandishing the gold ring like a protective object rather than an offering it to someone in love. A rather dramatic change of circumstances. There was one painting that wasn't of a person, but rather of the moon, Luna. The moon was full and bright with a figure in shadow in front of the moon. The figure was entirely shadowed, but I could see their arms outstretched to their sides like they were presenting themselves. And when the flames flickered, the painting changed again. The moon was no longer bright, it was dark and entirely in shadow. The stars in darkness were inverted, so you only knew the black moon was there by the absence of light. The stars were blotted out, but the figure before it was still visible. Not made out of light, but just made out of a lighter darkness, so you could barely see the figure in the shadow of the black moon. Now, with everyone inside, we took our time looking around the parlor. There were dozens of interesting objects and curios. It was a mechanical solar system that was geocentric with the sun, moon, and stars all rotating around the Earth in three different directions, creating a very confusing solar system. Definitely a fascinating curiosity that would be something I would want to see in my room. There were also multiple dolls around the room. All were stored in iron cages with nails in the dolls' heads, necks, and hearts, presumably to keep the dolls from wandering around. I had seen similar dolls before, once in a very run down and shitty bar in the Brannan district. I saw Autumn reach out for one before I called out, "Don't touch anything here. As long as we don't transgress, we cannot be punished." So if we mess with these items, it's going to create problems for us in the future. Let's just admire them quietly before going upstairs, I said as we continued on, looking over the many items. The tables were full of small figurines made out of bronze, obsidian, and crystal. Figures of pumpkin-headed figures doing everyday tasks in a Feralia village. A lot of work into such a small display. It was something made with love and willingly shared with us. Not too different from the grounds of the pumpkin house. Now satisfied with all of the amazing curios and curiosities of the parlor, we made our way to the stairway. The wood was stained and well cared for, almost golden in hue. The banister was white, with the chandelier above reflected rainbow hues down to us. As I stood on the first step, and sure enough, just like the legend, there were only 13 steps on the stairway leading to the second floor. An oddity, certainly, since there should be no logical way for 13 steps to be enough to reach a second floor. And yet I could count the steps and I could see it connect to the second floor. I took the first step, not even a creak on the stair. I took another step, and then another, and another. Step by step I kept climbing the stairs, and yet the second floor never got closer. Took a look behind me, I was still on the second step. My friends were still behind me on the ground floor. When I tried calling out to them, I could not hear my own voice, nor could I hear them, even though I could see them trying to yell and wave at me. Realizing that there was a problem, I turned around, now trying to make my way down. Although now there wasn't a single step before me, Somehow, there were 13 steps between me and the ground floor, and I felt dizzy, like I was kilometers above the ground floor. How was I only at the first step, and now I was just below the top of the stairs? I shook my head and I felt the wisdom of Sentinel whisper in my ear. Take the sword, break out of this illusion, I heard in my head, but I have gotten better at tempering the ring's desires. This wasn't actually a threat, it was a game, a haunt for us to solve. Trying to fight my way out would not work and almost definitely create bigger problems for me. I would have to solve this. I began to make my way down the stairs. Every step brought me down, and yet there were always 13 steps in front of me. It was disorientating to try and figure out where the disconnect was between me taking the step and the new step being created, but I couldn't figure it out. You're in a trap. You will be destroyed if you don't break out, Sentinel whispered to me in my own voice. I still resisted it, but it was harder. It was terrifying, and this didn't feel like a game. This did feel like a trap. I glanced down at my friends who were still waving at me, and I waved back weakly as I took a deep breath. It's a game. There is a way out. We know this, I said to the sentinel in my head. I had trust in my friends and in the fact that this was just another part of the house's haunt. Still, when I thought about my trust in my friends, I could hear Sentinel whisper in my voice, I don't trust them. You cannot trust them. It is harsh dealing with intrusive thoughts in your own voice, saying things that you don't believe, but you still feel like there is a part of you that also believes in it. Moments like this are hard to deal with when you have something like the Sentinel, so it helps to have an anchor, something I can have both myself and Sentinel agree on. You don't trust my friends? Fine. But do you doubt Adansi? I know you've dealt with her before, I thought, and the cold rage of the ring died down. There was no vocal response, but there was the action. Sentinel doesn't trust people. It doesn't trust my friends. Well, it doesn't even trust me. However, it trusts Adansi. Pumpkin House is old. Sentinel is older. And Adansi was older still. Let's try something crazy, I tried to say out loud, only to have no noise still. I couldn't hear my friends, and they couldn't hear me, but I had an idea. Something very crazy based on the story Adansi told me. The stairs always appeared like they had 13 steps ahead of me. However, how many steps were actually behind me? There was only one way to figure it out. I took a deep breath and took a step in backwards. There was a pop inside my ears like I was adjusting to a new air pressure. I could hear again and I leaned over the banister to call out to the others. There's a trick to going up these stairs. Once you make it to the second step, turn around like you're going to go down, then step backwards. There's some kind of illusion. One of the magician's tricks, maybe? But it was definitely intense, so don't be afraid to shut your eyes, I said as Summer made her way up the stairs. As soon as she made her way to the second step, she kept walking up until the step before the landing, where she turned around and took a step backwards. So that's how it looks from the outside. How did it look from your angle? I asked Summer. It was like you just froze on the second step. We kept trying to talk to you or even touch you, but every time we tried to step on your step, we found ourselves back on the landing. Then suddenly you went up to the top and turned around, but you still wouldn't move until you took a step backwards. I'm just glad you're okay, she said with a smile, and I nodded. The others soon followed, and now on the second floor, there was only one way forward, the hallway. The carpet was a lovely shade of scarlet, with blue wallpaper, covered in rose patterns full of red petals and green thorny stems. They were painted so well they looked like they could prick me just by touching them. We walked down the hallway, looking at the many paintings and mirrors that we passed. I saw a painting of myself it, with my black widow on my face, and I passed by mirrors with the spider smeared, but still there. Then, as we continued, the paintings changed in tone. I saw a painting of myself with my mother and grandfather. I was smiling brightly in front of my grandfather's house, but both my grandfather and my mother were frowning, tears in their eyes. When I saw that painting, I saw the mirror next to it. There was a frown on my face. When I tried to smile in the mirror, the reflection did not smile back. He kept frowning, and I could see he was very slightly shaking his head. He would not smile for me. I tried to move on, and as I moved on, the paintings only got darker. They didn't keep a consistent theme. There was one painting of my grandfather's house, empty except for myself in front of it, still smiling because my cheeks were torn back, forcing my face into a permanent smile with tears in my painted eyes. The mirror next to it was smiling. I don't like it when my reflection smiles and I don't. The painting after that showed the sentinel in his armor. He stood strong and heroic across a blasted landscape. Every building was knocked down, ash fell from the sky like snow. There was only ash, dust, rubble, and Sentinel standing triumphantly with a eclipsed moon in the background, victorious over every enemy because there was nothing left to conquer, everything destroyed, and only he remained, making him the greatest by simply being the last survivor. The painting had a single caption on it: "The Last Hero of Grave" by Dylan Dyson. I could feel a twinge of desire deep inside of myself. Something inside of me wanted to overcome everything. Doing it this way would finally silence the sentinel ring. I turned from the painting, focusing on my feet as we made our way to the bedrooms. I kept telling myself that it was the ring that desired violence and desired grave. That part of me that desired to see the blasted world, with the smell of burnt pork, ash, and the taste of death. That was the desire of the ring. It wasn't me. It wasn't a part of me, so I didn't need to confront it. Just keep it away from myself, just another intrusive thought. The doorway leading to the bedrooms had a massive engraving in the wood that showed us a massive knight. Their helmet hid their face, and their armor had streaks of rust and dents on the plates. However, the sword was shining and sharp, held aloft in their hands, pointing upwards towards a star directly above. Their heater at their feet had a single diamond in the middle of it. So I think it was supposed to represent the Knight of Pentacles, also known as the Knight of Diamonds. I tried the doorknob and it opened with ease. As I opened it, I tried to think what the knight might mean and what it might mean to me. Did it have something to do with that painting of the last hero of grave? I did not understand arcana nor cartomancy at all. All I knew about the Knight of Pentacles was it represented youth. Although that did not help me here, the bedroom beyond was a pretty standard bedroom. Desk in the corner, a bed in a different corner, a lamp that was on, a wardrobe against the wall, with another door to the right. The only thing that separated it from most bedrooms was the fact that there was no windows, and also the fact that almost everything was upside down. The bed, lamp, desk, door, all bolted to the ceiling with a chandelier on the floor, pointing towards the ceiling like gravity was pulling it up. The wardrobe, on the other hand, was on the floor, just beneath the door. Well, This is an interesting choice. Not going to lie, I would not have chosen that bed frame color with the wardrobe, Cal said, pointing it out, and I nodded, quietly agreeing with him. Blue-green bed frame with a red wardrobe was a very strange choice for a bedroom supposedly made for someone in college. Although everyone had their own tastes, it was definitely an odd enough choice and one that I would not have made. Think we can climb on the wardrobe and get to the door above, Bill said as I helped him get on top of the wooden wardrobe as he tried to open the door. Except the door did not wiggle and the doorknob did not move. Bill tried a few more times on before he knocked on the door. There was no hollow sound. It was as solid as the wall. There is something written on the door. Give me a second, Kel said as he ran his hands across the door as he read the words that were written there. What is the greatest thing you can do with power? He read out loud to us as we all turned to each other. Control it? Having power isn't the same thing as controlling it, Fallen Grace suggested as she flew around as Kel called from above. Measure it? You have to understand what power you have before you can try to control it, Cal suggested before Marceline made her request. Protect it? You have to keep it safe from danger before you can try to measure it, Marceline recommended before Summer made her guess. Grow it? You have to grow power before you can get to the point where you can protect it, Summer said as her sister made her choice. Have it. You have to have power before you can grow it, protect it, measure it, or even control it, Autumn said as the others nodded, and that didn't quite feel right either. They were thinking about power as an object. What is something you do to the object, not something you do with the object. That is confusing, so let's use an analogy. Think of power as a tree. You can have a tree, you can grow the tree, you can protect the tree, you can even measure it, and you can even control the tree. However, that is all actions you do to the tree, not something you do with the tree. So by thinking of power as a tree, it made it a lot easier to think about the riddle on the door. I felt my grandfather's words guiding me through it. It was like all of the times when he and I would make Samhain costumes together. He would explain what he was thinking, and he would let me ask questions and explain my thoughts. However, he would also patiently let me figure out the answers when I needed to. He would guide me through the questions and through the thoughts, but he would not give me the final answer. Sometimes it was frustrating for me, and I definitely know it was frustrating for him, but it helped me make the necessary connections. The key words here are with power, not do you do to power, not do you use what you use power for, what do you use with power, what is the greatest thing you can do with a tree. Trees can grow food, they produce fresh air, they can be used to prevent soil erosion, they can produce lumber, they produce shade. There is no one thing trees do. There is no one thing that power can be used for. Wait, I am not thinking it through properly. Not what does the tree do, not what do you do to the tree, what is the greatest thing you can do with the tree? The only thing I could think about was bringing my friends to my favorite tree on campus. It was an old apple tree that had been growing since the days before the Empire. It was comfortable. There were apples growing for snacking, and it was good shade during the summer, and it had plenty of light during fall and winter. The tree was somewhere we liked to gather together. It was somewhere I enjoyed, and the first thing I wanted to do once I discovered the tree was want to share it. And then I realized what the answer was. Power can be measured in lots of ways. It is often said that knowledge is power, but knowledge is also worthless when it's hoarded. When it's sealed away, it is not given a chance to grow. not given a chance to help others. Like a tree, by protecting it from the world, it dies. It isn't safe. Control is another way to see power. Having control over a country, having security is often seen as another form of power. However, too much control, too much security, can also become virtually meaningless, like a login process that requires multiple passwords, an email, a text message, and a phone call just to check a two-word message. It is far too much control that renders itself meaningless, like a tree that has so many different weeds growing over it, so everything is suffocating and nothing is thriving. Measuring power is difficult but a popular subject. It's often a popular subject between people to ask who would win in a fight. Who is more powerful? Who has more measurable power? Who has the biggest tree? Who has the most tree? Who has the most trees? Whose forest is the healthiest? Measuring the trees, measuring the power, has its uses, but like everything else so far, endlessly measuring things did not do anything with it, other than tell you how much you have. Growing power was also a very tempting option. Power can also be measured in wealth. As you accumulate wealth, you can grow in power, and as you reach a certain point, you grow wealth with greater ease. You have so much wealth, so much power, that merely the interest gathered on it grows faster than you could possibly spend it. The tree is grown so large that it can never be cut down, no matter or how fast you cut. Except that it also chokes out all life around the tree, leaving everything around that tree dying. The power becomes cancerous as it keeps trying to grow. Having power, some people measure what they have in power by what they have. You have a tree, you have a forest, you have a house, you have a mansion, you have a vehicle, you have a nice car, you own land, you own an empire, you have an assistant, you have a council, you have a Hulk, you have an army, you have something, you have power. People love to measure their power, themselves, by what they have. While having something isn't inherently a bad thing, measuring yourself by what you have is nearly antithetical to being noble. Having a tree means nothing more than you have a tree. The greatest thing you can do when you have power, it's also the greatest thing you can do when you have a tree. The greatest thing you can do with knowledge, wealth, control, and protection. Something that I remember being taught by my mother and grandfather many times. Something I feel that many people have been taught, but then either forgotten or ignored. Having power was like having a tree. Keeping it all to yourself isn't noble. Hoarding it isn't kind. There was only one answer. The greatest thing you can do with power is share it. Even if not everyone you share with it is noble, that doesn't make it a bad action. Sharing it keeps others from abusing it and keeps it from abusing you. I said as there was a click from the wardrobe, and it opened beneath Kel, revealing another hallway leading somewhere else. That's wonderful, but now we have a brand new problem, Kel said as I looked through the tunnel. And what is that, Kel? I asked him as he responded. I'm scared of falling. Can someone help get me down? He asked as Fallen Grace flew up to him and grabbed him by his shirt, picking him up, flying through the air. This tiny fairy holding Kel, who had to weigh at least 50 kilograms, hovering in the air. As his stomach was revealed to everyone, he was held up by his shirt. Two things. One, why didn't Fallen Grace fly up to check the door? He asked her as her voice called out to us, much louder than someone as small as her should have been. Why didn't you ask? She said to everyone. Good point. And second thing, he began before he slipped out of his shirt, falling directly into my arms. Yes, what was the second thing? I asked him while Fallen Grace flew down, holding his shirt. I was going to say I was slipping out of my shirt, but I think everyone knows that now, he said as he awkwardly put his shirt back on, still cradled in my arms. Things like this usually happen to Kel. He was somehow both the luckiest and unluckiest person I had ever met in the history of the planet. He had free tuition to college because he was ran over by a unitard-clad clown on a unicycle. He regularly fell into my arms like something out of a Tingle romance, but he also had no interest in romance nor relationships, so it was just always an awkward moment until it happened often enough that I just accept it as inevitably going to happen, and he accepts it's going to happen. His brother died at a young age, and that very same brother visits him once a month and for every Yule. His sister is an accomplished hunter in Albion who regularly checks up on him, and she only got contracts through people she was dating. Kel, how often are you going to fall into my arms? I asked him as I finally set him down. As long as you're always there to catch me, he said, not realizing how flirty it sounded. I giggled at the statement, though. Even here, in the pumpkin house, at the center of a pataphysical nexus inside Lockhart, he still had some of the oddest luck I have ever seen in my life. We entered the next bedroom together with Summer close by, as this bedroom was just a different version of the same bedroom. The bed, wardrobe, and desk were on the wall in front of us, the chandelier over us, but sticking out of the wall pointing towards the bed. The door was also on the floor leading down below us. The lamp was sitting on the floor in front of us, and also something that was out of place compared to everything else. Okay, who wants to check out the lamp? I asked as Autumn stepped forward to the lamp. It was off and shaded. Nothing special about the lamp as far as I could see. It looked like any other lamp in the dorm rooms. When Autumn turned the lamp on, instead of light coming out of the lamp, the chandelier stopped glowing, and we could see glowing words on the walls, emitted from an unknown source, but still, it offered us our next question. The words of light in the darkness asked us all, "What is the measure of a man?" We read it over together, and there was silence for a moment before Fallen Grace spoke up. "Well, you don't want my answer, but I've yet to find a man who can measure up to me," Fallen Grace said to the snickers of Autumn, Summer, and Marceline. It took both me and Kel a moment before we laughed as well. Funny as that was, I don't think the answer to this riddle was a joke. I felt like the answer had to be something personal to us all. The measure of a man is his honor, Autumn offered to the silence of the room. A few clicks of the lamp sounded like she was trying to turn the lights back on, but the room stayed dark and the words stayed on the walls. The door stayed locked, and that was either not the answer she was looking for, or she was waiting for us all to answer. A measure of a man is his strength, both of character and body, Summer said, offering the obvious answer. The same kind of answer that would have been given during the Great War, the same kind of answer that would have been given when the Argivians invaded Persia, the same kind of answer that would have been given during the Age of Ash. Still, there was no way forward. The measure of a man is his wisdom, Marceline said. Her voice echoed the word wisdom in the darkness, like she spoke with two voices. But after a moment the echo faded and there was silence again. The answer was still not taken. Finally, it was Kel's turn to answer. Even though it was dark, I knew he spent the time thinking it through to give the answer that worked best for him. He was an unusual young man, but he was a man. He knew what answer worked best for him, and he was waiting for his chance to speak. A true measure of a man is his adaptability, his ability to change, grow, and thrive in new situations. Bell said in the darkness, his words passed through it all. It felt closer, but it was still not the answer Adansi was looking for. It now fell down to me, and I thought it through. Fiddling with my ring, I thought back to my grandfather. He often talked about what it was to be a man, what it was to be a good person, what it was to be an individual, and what it was to be part of a community. We often talked about it underneath the pink, blue, and white flag on his porch. I remember all of those times at school when I would be told by students and teachers that what I did was wrong or made me feminine in some way, that masculinity was something that could be lost if not strictly adhered to, that I had to be stronger, stoic, smarter, swifter, so much more than I was, and it was always more than what I had or what I was. I remember a teacher bragging about how many hours he spent repairing an old car, and how he casually brought up the fact he would often start working on it before his kids woke up, and he would still be working on it until after they went to bed. The other boys in the class were so impressed and loved seeing the pictures of the cars. Pictures he kept on his computer and pictures in his workspace. He had no pictures of his children, none of his wife, just him and his car. And the kids thought it was amazing he was working on the same car for over 10 years and he had been away from his children for so long. I remember checking the bottom of my shoes only to be sent to the principal's office. I did not even know why. I was only told I was not behaving appropriately. The principal told my home where my grandfather had a meeting with the principal. In less than 5 minutes, he took me home and we spent the entire day baking and cooking. I found out years later that apparently the principal was told that I was violating the school's strictly gendered dress code by checking the bottom of my shoes like a girl. To everyone at school, masculinity and femininity was always an action, something you had to do strictly to get it right every time. The way you walked, the way you held your books, the type of colors you wore, how long your hair was, the shoes you wore, the things you ate, even the family members you had. If you did something wrong, you would be bullied for it. You'd always be known as the weirdo. To my grandfather, he did not care how I acted or what I wanted to eat. If I wanted to grow my hair long, he would show me how to properly brush and braid my own hair. If I wanted the pink cupcakes, he would make sure I would have it. To him, my actions did not make me more masculine nor feminine. It was my choice what I wanted to be, and it was my choice to be me. That connection helped me have the next key for this question. As tempting as it was to say it was actions that defined the measure of a man, that wasn't completely true. Sure, the actions and inactions told you about what kind of person that they were, but everyone was interpreting the question wrong. The question wasn't how do you measure a man as in how do you measure a person, it was how do you measure how much of a man a person is. If I answered the question as the measure of a man is his actions, I wouldn't be saying that you measure what kind of person they are by their actions. I would be saying you would know if they're a man or not by their actions. This question and the last question were made for me. They were made for me to answer, although I still don't know what benefit there would be for sharing the answer with everyone. I still answered. The measure of a man is his choices, I said as the words vanished and there was a click as the door swung open. A ladder down below is visible. Those were the words that spoke to me. My grandfather told me I would have to make choices on who I wanted to be. My actions would be how people saw me, but I would have to make choices to define myself to myself. I climbed down to the final bedroom. Everything was where it was supposed to be. The final door had the question inscribed with gold. Everyone came down with, and when everyone came down with me, we read all the golden words together. What makes a hero? was inscribed in gold on the door. I could feel everyone's eyes on me now. We all learned our lesson from the last two trials, and now they wanted me to go first instead of them. This question was the most open of them all so far. There are many answers that could be said here. All of them could be accurate. It could be honor, resolve, care, kindness, compassion, heart, courage, or even something more exoteric like action, strength, or even results. Still, that didn't feel like the answer the door wanted. It could have been something about tragedy, journey, or even about their end goals. Overthinking about it all, I rethought the question: what makes a hero? Trying to step outside of thinking of heroes as something that is esoteric and a higher concept, I had to break it down to a simpler concept, like thinking of power as a tree or thinking about a man as a percentage. So if you break down a hero to the simplest component, you have a person whose choices and sharing of power helps others. We've already shown that we would share power and who makes choices that would help others. So what's missing? Sharing power, our choices. The only thing missing was us. And even when then the answer us was not quite accurate. It wasn't my friends that found the answers to the other questions. It was what I answered. So now I have the answer to the question. What makes a hero? Me, I said as the door clicked and it opened. Behind it, I could see the library of the pumpkin house. Stepping through the door, the library was warm and cozy. There were floors above us, and I could see never-ending bookshelves, although there was no ladder and no staircase leading up. The way forward had a few different fuzzy chairs that could be used to be sat in while reading. A beautiful place to visit. We continued past that area to head deeper as we passed by more sitting areas and alcoves. One alcove I could look out, and I could see a beautiful midday sun. Except the sun was a lot smaller and weaker than normal, like it was behind thick clouds, except there were no clouds. And at the edges of the horizon there were stars that were visible in the middle of the day, and there were 4 different moons that were visible in the sky. All of the moons in different phases all together, making the moons in different crescents and shapes. The only clue to where it was the inscription of Astoria above the window. The next alcove showed a fog that was so thick that nothing else could be seen beyond the gray. A handprint was left on the window from the other side. A handprint that seemed so lonely in the fog with no structures, no people, nothing beyond the fog except the single solitary handprint. And the inscription above that read that it was elsewhere. Interestingly, there was someone sitting there in that alcove. Their long curly hair passed their shoulders, a black mask with rainbow snowflakes covered their nose and mouth. The book they were reading had a symbol on it that looked like an eye. I took one look at them, and they took one look back at me. Whoever they weren't an actor. They weren't a part of the pumpkin house. They just wanted to be left alone, and so we left them alone. Although as we passed by, I couldn't help but notice the smile in their eyes and some tears beginning to form as we passed by. A tear formed in my own eyes as I walked by, and I wiped it away. At the time, I couldn't tell you why I cried. Now, well, I still couldn't tell you why. It wasn't often something like that happens. It was like being smiled at by someone that loved you, someone that you never knew personally, but when you see them, you know that they love you. Whoever that was, they affected me just by sitting there and reading. We continued in the library. as we found a long table that had 7 chairs and teacups at every chair. We quickly got to our spots, falling Grace sitting on the table, not being able to reach the cup from the chair that was made for someone much larger than herself. The head of the table was empty, for a moment at least, until I blinked, and then there was someone sitting at the head of the table. She resembled her statue in the Morris mine. She wore a large hat with many ribbons of many colors, including the color purple. Her chest cavity was broken open, and her heart was visible as it beat. Her face was half torn off, but she still spoke with ease, and she lifted a tea spout, filling her cup first with red tea, as she got off her seat to fill each of our cups, one at a time. I tried to speak, to ask her what was happening, why she looked that way. I opened my mouth, but I was unable to speak. She lifted a single finger to her lips, shushing me as she filled each of our cups. Taking her time to fill the cups, when she came near me, I could see that she was smiling on the non-injured side of her face. Her smile set me at ease, but I still had to look all over all the little ways she didn't move quite right. The way she walked without quite touching the floor, or how she slid halfway through the table to fill the cup with steaming red tea. No matter what angle I looked at her, she was looking me in the eyes, with her mouth smiling towards me. Even when she was walking her way, her head was completely turned around, her smile and her eyes digging into mine. She always felt like she was the size of a child, and yet when she walked behind the chairs, she was tall enough to be seen, like she was taller than 2 meters. She filled Fallen Grace's cup and was small enough to stand in front of the fairy without blocking her face. She wasn't changing size, she was all of those sizes at the same time. When she sat in her chair, even though she did not completely fill the chair, she dominated the space. Every instinct in my body told me she represented and radiated power. Although I never met her before, based on context, I could tell who she was. The Marquess of Madness, the Forever Child, the Goddess of Lockhart, the First Hero, the Lost Wanderer, Adansi, the Lady of the Pumpkin House, and the final prize of the entire haunted adventure. Thank you all for your patience. Now, I am sure you all know about the prize at the end of this all. However, as you all know, the best kind of prize is a surprise. So, as we drink, I will have surprise. Bring your prizes to you all. But let us drink and talk, Adansi said as she poured honey into her tea as we all drank. And Fallen Grace finally spoke up. Adansi, why did you change so much this year? The fairy asked the lost wanderer, who tilted her head. I don't know what you mean. There's always something new every year for the pumpkin house. I didn't change at all, unless you mean by something as superficial as my face and heart. When you get as old as I do, the heart changes easier than you change your mind, Adansi said as she drank the tea. The blood-red tea viscously fell from the hole in her cheek and leaked out of her cavity in her chest, staining her dress. I was talking about the overseer, Fallen Grace said as Adansi nodded. Oh, that. As you know, the pumpkin house changes year to year, person to person. It is what scares you. It's what frightens you. And you, Fallen Grace, feared the pain above all else. Did I change so much? I am vast, not unchangeable, but so vast that very little change can be considered significant. So, did I change this year? Or did you change a lot, Sage Son, since when you last came here? Adansi asked, and Fallen Grace nodded, accepting what Adansi said before Autumn decided to ask Adansi something. Why the face? Autumn asked as Adansi raised a hand to the uninjured part of her face. Oh, most people I find prefer speaking to someone with a face, although there are some, such as yourself, who prefer to speak to someone with no mouth to argue against them, no eyes to judge them, and no nose to turn up at them. Do you find the idea of my face so disquieting that you prefer that I don't have one? The Marquess asked Autumn Oram, who shook her head. No, that isn't what I meant at all. I'm just saying your face doesn't look whole. You look injured. Autumn tried to salvage the situation as I flicked my eyes to Summer, who we both did a tight-lipped smile towards each other as I turned to Kel, who was busy holding his head in his hands. While in Grace, I couldn't see her expression. She was too busy hiding her face in the teacup, drinking from the cup like a trough. Marceline just shook her head and sighed. We all knew how Adansi spoke and answered questions, and here Autumn was, sitting before one of the most legendary figures in the history of all that is, and she is focusing on something as superficial as a facial illusion. If you're asking if I'm hurt, I'm fine, physically, although my heart definitely has been hurt a little by your words, Adansi said, no longer drinking her tea, both of her hands resting on the table, palms down, and I could feel tension in the air, strong enough to cut through. Autumn was still oblivious to it all. I'm glad you're not hurt. However, your face is unsettling as it is. Maybe you should change it to something that is less unsettling? Autumn suggested as Adansi focused her eyes on Autumn. Until this moment, Adansi was looking at me directly, her eyes not blinking. Eyes that had a color I could never describe, while also never being able to forget it. I'm pretty certain everyone else was seeing the same thing. Even as she spoke to Fall and Grace and Autumn, her eyes and face were still turned my way, although at that moment she no longer looked my way. She focused on Autumn, and that terrified me in my seat. I am comfortable with my face how it is. If you are uncomfortable with my face, you don't have to look at me. You don't have to speak with me. You can just ignore me and let me be comfortable, Adansi said. Her voice shifted, no longer sounding like a silly girl, sounding like a harbinger. Well, I have to look towards you. It's rude not to look at someone while speaking, Autumn began, as Adansi interrupted her. Then tear out your eyes. If looking upon me offends you so much, tear out your own eyes before you ask anyone to change who they are and make you more comfortable. You think I am more offended by a lack of eye contact than I am by insulting my face? I am many things, Autumn, Abigail, Argentum. I do not enjoy having my time being wasted. It is a far greater insult than anything you can say about my face. So choose your next words with care, Adansi said, her voice booming through the library. Autumn looked towards her tea before she finally spoke. This tea is very good, is it cherry? She asked Adansi, who smiled again, and she turned back to me, presumably towards everyone else at the same time. She picked up her tea, stirring it as she lifted it to her torn face again. It is. Cherry tea goes quite well with raspberry honey, I find. I'm glad you enjoy it, Autumn, she said as we drank in silence for a few moments before Adansi spoke to Summer next. I admire your work in the mine. You have a lot to discover about yourself, Summer. Do not fear exploration. There are many dangerous places in the world, but just like that mine, you have to suit up to explore it safely. It doesn't mean that there isn't something for you in the mine, Dauncey said as she sipped her tea. and she turned to Kel next. As for you, the studious one, the strange one, the admired, as you know, death is the least of your concerns. However, it should still be a concern for you. Death is rarely so kind twice in the same family. Although I do hear that you impressed Jack, and he is almost never impressed anymore, she said as she turned to Marceline. My dear prince, are you still hesitant? That is your right, that is your choice, that is your duty. However, I cannot offer you more wisdom than I did earlier. You cannot build an ark after it starts raining, and you should not bake bread before it finishes proofing. Don't rush yourself, but don't hesitate forever. Just because it isn't raining now doesn't mean it won't ever rain, she said as she turned to me, and she said the shortest sentence I've heard yet. Your grandfather is very proud of you. He will fulfill his promise, she said as she finished her tea. Now, with all of our tea gone, Adansi rested her hands on her leg as she spoke. As she spoke, a figure in a dark hood came out of the darkness and laid her gifts in front of us, each gift explained with both a strangely new familiarity. To Mark Pierce, the Red Prince, you sought a great prize in the countryside. You have many wonderful strengths, body, mind, soul, heart, and being. However, hand-eye coordination is definitely not one of them. You sought out this prize so much, something that when you saw it you did not recognize, but immediately loved. A creature that represents a large part of yourself. A part of yourself that you once hated, once fought, that you now love and embrace. I hope you see this prize and remember how much it means to you. You remember to always love yourself as much as you love this prize. Bedansi said as the figure in the cloak laid out a small four-legged animal on the table. The toy was bone white with stubby legs, a big round head, and two black eyes that did not focus on the same thing. The nose was a single line and the mouth was a short, straight line. It was adorable, certainly, but it was not something I could tell you what it was. When Marceline saw it, she hugged it close to her chest and started crying over the yippee. Clearly, this prize did mean a lot to her. And for falling grace, you've struggled against tragedy your entire life. You give a persona of strength and stoicism because you've seen your emotions and weakness used against you. Despite your impossible walls around your heart, you always had a weakness for others. You still care about others, even when someone you don't know is hurting. You hurt too. You want them to heal and be well, even to your detriment. So to you, lost princess of the Florian fairies, I give you a reminder of tragedy. That you see it not as a reminder of tragedy, but as a promise that even tragedies can have tears of joy, she said as Sir Prize brought forth a teddy bear much larger than Fallen Grace, lying the stuffed animal in front of her. The fairy almost reached out to touch the animal, just stopping short, not quite touching it. She seemed hesitant to accept it. I could see her shaking at first. I thought she was angry, but then I realized she was sobbing. She was sobbing so badly that she was shaking and nearly collapsing into the arms of the teddy bear. The parents found their child. They lost the toy, but they regained who the toy once belonged to. The Dauncey said as Fallen Grace sobbed louder, crying into the embrace of the teddy bear. As for you, Kel, you already were given your prize, but honestly, we're still giving it to you again because it's fun. For one whose heart carries so much love, your passions burn in a shade misunderstood by many. It burns gray, white, black, and green, recognized, respected, and received by the Jack of Hearts. It will never wilt. It will never weaken. It will remind you that you are not broken, that your heart is whole as it is, and that your heart will save so many others. that none will ever count them all, she said as Surprise laid out an envelope in front of Kel. As he opened it, retrieving from the inside of it a rose that was two different shades of green, one shade of white, one shade of gray, and one shade of black. The thorns did not prick his fingers, but still I could see tears filling up his eyes. That rose meant so much to him, matching the pen on his lapel. As for you, Autumn, you have a lot of progress made and a lot more to go. You have a lot to learn about the worlds that you are a part of, so I hope that you will see what I give you and remember what you are willing to give up to help others. However, I hope you also see the cost associated with helping others and in making assumptions about how others will behave. Just because someone should act a certain way does not mean that they will, Adansi said as Surprise laid out a gray chip in front of Autumn, a single red thumbprint in the center, the same chip that Autumn gambled in the casino, a gamble that gave us all passage, but also nearly cost her both her life and her freedom. Autumn did not cry. Her face was blank, but she slipped the chip away into her pocket. I do not know if she was listening to what Adansi was saying. She certainly heard Adansi's word, but that was not the same thing as listening or even understanding. For Summer, you were tricky. You cared for those who came before you. You cared for those statues. You did not know who they were, what they represented. You just knew that they were once people and you mourned them all the same. So this prize to you isn't a reminder that they once died. It is to remind you that they once lived. The world is full of death and tragedy, but if you focus on all of the darkness, then you may never see how full of light the night truly is. Adansi finished as a limestone statuette of a ghost figure was put in front of Summer. Summer examined the figurine, careful not to touch it, but she seemed fascinated by the golden eyes of the little statue. Now it was Adansi's turn to focus on me. Her head did not move, but it did feel like something in the room shifted as she spoke to me. Did everyone else now see her looking my way, or was it something else entirely? As she spoke, I felt like the pressure and the voices from the sentinel weren't in my head. For the first time in almost a year, a burden that I did not know that I was carrying eased. So I relaxed as she spoke, and Surprise brought forth my own gift. You were promised a long time ago to have the heavens in your hands. You were so young at the time you thought you were promised to have the stars above. You only realized at a far greater age that you were promised Sentinel and not the stars. However, I do have something I hope you will use and remember. Consider it an old promise kept and a new promise made, she said as Surprise left the model of the solar system I saw in the first room in front of me. Now I had a much closer look. I could see the rotating stars, moon, and sun around the planet in the center. It looked like somewhere I may have never heard of before. You were promised the heavens in your hand, and you have that. And the new promise? That model represents Lockhart. My own home, my own heavens. You will visit Lockhart. The question of when? At a time when it is proper to go, she said as I watched in fascination of all of the moving constellations of bronze and gold around the blue-green jewel in the center of it all. When you all make it home, you will find these prizes, along with anything else you bought here, in your rooms. Thank you so much for helping me celebrate Feralia. I just hope you all remember how to wake up, Dauncey said as the lights went out. I don't know how long I was asleep for, but when I woke up in my bed, I thought for a moment that it was just a dream, until I saw on my desk the model of the Lockhart system. The stars cast light into my room as they wandered in the night, surrounding the planet. I laid my head on the pillow, looking above at the ceiling. That was definitely a fun time recommended by Fallen Grace, and I think spending time in the Black Moon Club with my friends is definitely going to be worth it. I felt like I finally found somewhere I belonged in Sam LaSalle University.